Utah Pride is kicking me out.
Some of you will recognize Lady Maga from when she was interviewing one of the queers for Palestine and accidentally made that person look like a fool.
I am fearful of Islam because there is no Islamic country on earth that embraces me as a gay man.
So, okay, so maybe I'm confused because Israel, which is still an Islam country, right?
No, Jewish.
Okay.
So Israel's Jewish, Palestinians are Islamic.
Okay.
But in today's episode, Lady Maga has just been kicked out of Utah Pride, and we're gonna talk about it. And as dramatic as it sounds, I think this is one of the reasons Pride is officially over, whether the activists realize it or not.
So the decision has been made by the people that are producing this event that they do not want you on property anymore, okay?
But they will not tell me why.
I can 100% tell you why, and by the end of this video, I'm gonna give you the real reason. And if you think this is something you've heard me say before, I can guarantee you it is not, because I just fully figured it out myself. What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. All right, you guys, I decided to make this video because what has the world come to when a drag queen gets kicked out of a Pride event? But then really, at this point, should we be surprised? Because we've already seen something similar happen with Blair White, who is trans. We've seen something similar happen with Ariel Scarcella, who is a lesbian. There also was that situation recently in the UK where they let it be known that LGB voices would not be welcomed. So why would this be any different? But it really did make me start to wonder, why would Pride not want members of its own community to be at Pride festivals? Oh, and before anybody says, of course they don't want her. Her name is Lady Maga USA. And to that I would say, you obviously do not know the history of drag in the gay community. See, because back in the day, people from the LGBTQ community, which at that time was more commonly referred to as the gay community, which meant the festival itself was known as Gay Pride, and then eventually it just became Pride, which I think that should have set off a few alarms for people, but everybody just let it pass. I personally noticed it, didn't make a big deal of it because I'm not really a Pride person at this point, or I wasn't a Pride person when that happened, but I definitely noticed when it went from being Gay Pride to just being Pride, and I knew that something was rotten in Denmark. But what I'm getting at is back in those days, everybody would have been cool with a person like Lady Maga USA, because people understood that drag queens were supposed to be ridiculous, and nobody really cared if they were serious or not, or even gave it a second thought. Because the fact that they were men in women's clothing was kind of an indicator that they weren't to be taken seriously, so you could just let your guard down and have fun with drag queens. Oh, and for anybody that's wondering why I'm referring to Lady Maga as she and her,
I'm not transgender. I don't represent transgender people.
And why I'll be doing that throughout the video. I know I have to address this almost every video that I talk about anybody that does any form of gender bending, but in this particular situation, what I'll tell you is I have been around drag queens my entire adult life. So when it comes to me and drag queens, it's very easy for me to just refer to them as she and her when they're in drag, because that's just the way my mind computes it. But if you want to know how little I care about pronouns, let me give you an example. My two best friends are gay men. Their names are Thomas and Derek, more commonly referred to by us in the crew as Thomasina and Derequisha. And when the three of us are around each other, or when we're chatting on Instagram Messenger, we refer to each other almost exclusively in she, her pronouns. None of us are confused about our gender. None of us claim to be anything other than what we are. We're just gay men having fun, and that's how little that we in the community used to care about pronouns. So if that really bothers any of you, it's time to tune out, Grandma and Grandpa, because that will not be my issue. We've got things to talk about.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Lady Maga USA. I was kicked out of the Utah Pride Festival.
Your only option is either you leave willingly or the police escort you off property.
Ooh, They done kicked her out like a psycho ex. They gave her the old, we got the police here, you can either leave on your own or they can take you out. Damn shame. By the way, before we go any further, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We're trying to see how quickly we can get to 100,000 subscribers. We're right around 85,000 right now. Thank you all very much. When you hit the subscribe button, make sure you click the bell and select all notifications so that you know every time I upload. Now let's get back to it.
Gay man in a wig in a celebration that's supposed to be all about diversity and inclusion. They told me that if I did not leave, I would be arrested.
So either you leave or you get taken away by the police.
Which we don't want to do. About it.
I just don't know what my infraction is. I haven't done anything.
If you didn't hear the police in the background, they said they didn't want to do that. And really, this guy that's speaking to Lady Maga right now, I don't think he probably even knows why he's officially being asked to take this person out or what the threat is. And I don't think he really cares, because a lot of people in the community right now, or people that are working for the community, I'm not sure exactly what this guy's position is, if he's even an actual gay person or if he's just somebody in some way affiliated as far as being security or an organizer. But I would doubt that this person even realizes why they're putting Lady Maga out. And one thing I want to address really quick is I noticed that anytime I talk about pride, people in the comments will ask, why do gay people have to have a whole month? Why do they have to celebrate who they have sex with? Let me help you out with that. First off, I'll tell you that I did a full video about the history of pride last year. I will go ahead and make that the pinned comment if you want to see that video and learn the history. But what you need to know about Pride is Pride was originally not a full month. What it was a season. And back in the day, it used to last from about April until September. That's how long Pride season was. And the reason that it was a season was because they didn't want the cities to have to compete, because if you packed every city that was having a Pride into June, there obviously wouldn't be enough weekends for people that wanted to go to multiple Prides. And also because for a lot of gays, Pride was like a circuit. So they would just pick a couple different Prides that they wanted to be at, and they were part of the atmosphere. So circuit gays were definitely a part of the reason that Pride was a season. And before everything became so mainstream, nobody ever had a problem with that because nobody outside of the community really even knew it. And that's a part of my point when I talk about all this stuff, is one of the things that I don't think a lot of people get was Pride was never meant to be for straight people. And Pride was never meant to be corporate. Undeniably, it turned into that, and I can see that myself. And I know that the community really did have a lot to do with that. Or should I say, the activists who represent the community had a lot to do with that. So I'm not blaming you guys for knowing about Pride. I'm not going to pretend that for the last several years it hasn't been shoved down everybody's throat. But really, it wasn't meant for you guys. So how long it took for Pride to happen, or how long everybody celebrated Pride, was nothing for you to worry your pretty little heads about. But if you need to know why Pride originally became a thing and why Pride was important, it was because for a long time there were consequences to being gay. And that's how Pride originally started, was the police in New York went in to raid a notorious gay bar called the Stonewall Inn. And without going too much into the history, the police would, in some cases, shake the gays down. If you were dressed in clothing from the other gender, that was illegal at the time. And even just being gay or having gay relations especially were illegal acts. So originally Pride was born out of protest and a need for rights, or at least humane treatment. That's originally what Pride was. Then in the 80s, also known to some as the AIDSies, that's when HIV/AIDS became a real issue in the gay community. And even though people will constantly tell you that HIV and AIDS were not gay diseases, they really did wreck the gay community. And so at that point, Pride was not only about rights, but it was also about raising money for AIDS and HIV research, and about raising awareness about HIV and AIDS, since within the community, we really weren't getting a lot of information And if you don't know about the administrations, namely the Reagan administration, they saw HIV and AIDS as a punishment for the gays. So there wasn't really a lot being done in the way of actually trying to combat it or treat it like anything that should be taken seriously. So that too was a part of the Pride function. And then on the social end, it was a chance once Pride got bigger and wasn't just New York, San Francisco, LA, which were the original 3 cities. Once it expanded past that, what Pride was an opportunity for gay people that were living in more conservative states to be able to go out and express themselves, to be able to have one day where they could be out in the open, hold hands with their partners, kiss their partners if they wanted to, and just kind of feel normal, for lack of a better term, because that really wasn't a thing. And I know that a lot of people don't understand that, especially a lot of straight people don't understand exactly how repressive it was being gay, even in the 90s, like being openly gay. Like in the 90s, if you were a guy holding your boyfriend's hand or a girl holding your girlfriend's hand in a public place, people would stare at you like it was a circus. Sometimes people would be aggressive with you. People would say things to you or call you names, call you slurs openly. And the way that society saw it was, if you didn't want that to happen, you wouldn't be gay. And this is a part of gay history that I personally lived through. And that's something I dealt with because I always wanted to be able to show some sort of affection with the people that I was dating. I always felt like that, and I feel like that to this day, where if I'm with somebody, I'm going to hold their hand. I'm not one of those people that's going to have a makeout session in front of strangers, but if I'm getting on a plane or if I'm saying goodbye to them for the day so they can go to work or dropping them off, there will be a kiss, there will be some sort of affection. And that was treated like such a big deal when we were younger that for some of us, it was just nice to go out and be able to fully express yourself and be as gay as you wanted to for a day in public. And when it came to children being at Pride, children have always been at Pride, usually because their lesbian mothers had lived different lives before they came out, or in some cases, their fathers had lived different lives before they came out. But we were always on our best behavior when the children were around. It wasn't like it is now, where people are trying to expose the young ones to a bunch of stuff that they really have no business seeing. And I'm not really sure why they even want to show that part of themselves to children. But that's where it's at now. And I understand why people are like, children shouldn't be there. But that's just setting up a little bit of the background for you guys and letting you guys know the way that it used to play out. You also have to remember that back in those days, being trans wasn't a badge of honor. And there were a lot of trans people, I know here in Arizona specifically, that had to basically detransition every day in order to go to work. And I am not exaggerating at all. Like if they were a trans woman and they had hormones, so they had some breasts grow in or even implants, and they weren't completely passable and their IDs hadn't changed and they wanted to have a traditional job, a day job, you could say, what they had to do was basically strap down their breasts, not wear makeup, put their hair in a ponytail, and try as hard as they could to look either androgynous or just outright masculine. And since most of them weren't going to be able to pass for masculine and those kinds of men, what they would do is go with an androgynous look, but they knew better than to just come out and say that they were trans because there would be actual consequences. And so with all of those things combined, there was a point in time where Pride was actually very important for the gay community. Now, that's not really the case a lot of places, so there's quite a bit of debate on whether or not Pride is actually necessary, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
If the event decides that you're not welcome anymore, then you are required to leave.
I was there to have dialogue with people.
Well, that's your problem right there, Miss Loretta. You were there to have dialogue with people, knowing that the activists and the organizers of Pride are there to do a monologue. And not only a monologue, but a monologue that's meant to instill fear in the parts of the community that will still buy into it. And while they're instilling that fear, another part of what they're trying to do is basically give people from the community their marching orders and their talking points. So the last thing they need is somebody like you, somebody like me, somebody like Blair White, somebody like Ariel Scarcella, somebody like the LGB Alliance coming in and possibly undoing all of their hard work, even if that wasn't your intention. So I don't know why you even came in trying to have dialogue at that event. I mean, none of the colors or shapes on that hideous flag represent free thinking or productive dialogue, so I'm with Pride and the police on this one. You need to pack up your witchcraft and get out. Sorcery will not and should not be tolerated.
What brought you to Pride today?
Just want to support everyone out there, and I'm trans myself, so it's good to see the community.
Listen, America, we got a lot of issues going on, but the children these days, they don't even know Saved by the Bell or Gem and the Holograms.
I've heard of Saved by the Bell.
They don't even know Saved by the Bell and Gem and the Holograms. The younger generation is in worse shape than I thought. Shut it down. This is blasphemy.
My goal was to show that we can have respectful dialogue back and forth. These are not leading questions. We're leading with love. We're celebrating Pride Month here. Are you also proud to be an American?
I am a U.S. citizen as of December, so I am absolutely proud to be an American.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna make me cry.
This bitch barely beat the buzzer. God bless her and God bless this country. I'm so glad that was her answer because I was about to say someone needs to call ICE.
I don't like the idea of painting everyone at a Pride festival as evil or predatory because they're not. I wasn't even wearing anything that identified me as Lady Maga USA because I didn't want to be controversial.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stop her right there because she is playing in our faces right now, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to do it. I really like Lady Maga, but I'm going to have to call her out because she may not be wearing Lady Maga gear right now, but she is wearing a t-shirt that says, "No child is born in the wrong body." And she had to know that that was going to cause some controversy with the soft asses that represent Pride at this point. And I'm sure what probably happened is one of the gays or the queers that was attending the festival saw the shirt and decided to go running to the teacher, which would have been either the organizer or security, and was like, "She's wearing a shirt that's very transphobic." And then that's when this turned into a real issue. Not to mention, Lady Maga is well known enough online that I'm sure a fair amount of people knew that was her and decided to snitch on her for that alone. But Lady Maga, you knew that shirt was going to trigger some people, and you will not convince me of anything else. Tell the truth and shame the devil.
We talked about things that we should be fighting about, but we both spoke with kindness. I prayed really heavily before I came here that I would meet the right people who would help the message get out in a positive way, not a us versus them way. Y'all in America, please, more of this. You're incredible. Okay.
Okay, all joking aside, I can't wait until Lady Maga actually releases the footage of the conversation that she had with this person, because if you remember from just a few minutes ago, this person identifies as a trans man. And this is where part of the problem comes in. Because what the activists want everybody to think is that a person that comes from Lady Maga's background, which obviously by the name Lady Maga lets you know that she definitely does support Donald Trump, and you can also assume that she's not down with gender ideology.
Let it be known across the world that Lady Maga USA is not queer. I don't identify with the queer community. I'm not an alphabet. I'm not LGBTQ. I'm not LGBTQIA+. And I sure as heck reject queer theory.
So the way they would try to paint a person like Lady Maga is that she is a bigot. And then the way that they'll try to paint trans people in the community, or the way that LGBT activists will try to paint trans people, is that they're all too emotional to be able to have a good or a constructive conversation, even if at the end of that conversation both sides don't agree. So this is where the problem really comes in, is because they don't want both sides getting together and not only having conversations, but giving the general public the idea that these conversations can happen, that these conversations can be had, because they have to keep everybody separate in order to keep the narrative going. And it's just a matter of fact that in order for that narrative to really keep going, Lady Maga has to be one of the most hateful people in the world, and trans people have to be fragile enough that they're going to end it all if somebody says something that they don't agree with.
There is no evidence whatsoever that I did anything disruptive or did anything wrong. I don't want an apology. I want to know specifically why I was kicked out of the Utah Pride Festival.
Girl, I just said by the end of this video, I will tell you why you were kicked out of the Utah Pride Festival. Stop being so pushy. Oh, you mean from them? Okay, well, they probably will never give you an answer because they don't want to own up to exactly what it is they're doing, because to admit would be to admit that 1, they're evil, and 2, they're greedy, or 1, they're greedy, and 2, they're evil. Either way, that's what it really comes down to. But I'm gonna get a little more in depth after you finish your part.
I can't lie. This gets old.
Girl, who you telling?
If you're a common sense gay or lesbian, please speak out. I'm tired of taking the punches. Join me. God bless you, and please just speak up.
What do you think I'm doing? All jokes aside, Lady Maga USA, I definitely do see you, and I know that sometimes you probably do feel alone, but just understand that there are a lot of us that are speaking up and speaking out, and more every day are starting to speak up and speak out. And now we can get to the real reason that Lady Maga and so many others from the LGBTQ community that don't carry the approved message are being kicked out of Pride events. And there's more than one reason. One of the reasons is Pride is not necessary anymore. Yeah, maybe in some small towns, I guess they could still use it. But overall, people have become accepting enough of LGBTQ that it's really not a thing where they need the visibility or the safe space anymore. Anybody can go anywhere and see gays and lesbians holding hands. It's just really not a thing like that anymore. And I'm not saying that there's not a need for LGBTQ resources, because there definitely are. One day we can discuss that a little more in depth. But Pride itself is an unnecessary exercise, an unnecessary protest, an unnecessary parade, an unnecessary party. That's the truth about Pride. But if you think about the recap I gave you and the reasons for Pride, and you go back to the beginning, obviously people aren't getting arrested just for being gay anymore. Gay bars aren't being raided. People can wear whatever they want. That's somewhat of a curse even when it comes to straight people, but people can wear whatever they want. And for the last several years now, being trans has been seen as a badge of honor, and it's only recently that people have started to turn on trans. So the visibility part, not really necessary. Then when it comes to HIV and AIDS, I think most people are pretty well educated on that, and because so many people are on PrEP now, which if anybody's not familiar with PrEP, that's a pill you can take daily that is as effective as condoms, and most gay men are on PrEP these days. And then also for people that are living with HIV, HIV at this point is very much a manageable condition, and we're not going through what we were in the 80s where people were actually dying of AIDS. Most people that have HIV are able to take the meds and get themselves to being undetectable, which is almost the same as not even having HIV. So there's not really a need for it there. And then as far as actual rights go, gay marriage, that kind of thing, gay marriage ended up happening in 2015. So for a lot of us in the community, the fight is over at this point. But what everybody has to remember is that during those years when we were making those strides as a community, gay was becoming a very big business. And handling the business and the activism of the gay community, or what eventually became the LGBT community, and then the LGBTQ community, and then the LGBTQ plus community, and then the LGBTQIA plus community, and then the 2S LGBTQI plus community. But during all those iterations, the business of being gay and the activism of being gay became a very cushy spot for a lot of people. It became a very well-paying job with a lot of extra benefits, which I am 100% sure it did not start off that way. I'm sure at the beginning there was genuine activism. I'm sure it was genuinely grassroots at the beginning. But even if, say, in the 80s, it started to become a little profitable. Let's take from 1981, which is when HIV and AIDS first came on the scene. If you take from 1981 until 2015, when gay marriage happened, not only were these people making money by 2015, and when I say these people, I mean the activists and the organizers within the LGBTQ community. They also were rubbing shoulders with celebrities, and it also came with a bit of political pull as well. And so even if you were to take the money away, which I'm sure they wouldn't be happy about at all, if you think that people don't get addicted to power and political connections, I've got a gay charity I want you to contribute to. You can send your donations to Ty Rivera-Comedy on Venmo, and I'll tell you all about it. So I'm sure around that time, probably 2016, 2017, it really started to hit them that the grift was about to be over, that the jig was about to be up. So they needed to create a new victim, and the perfect victim was going to be the trans people. And I'm sure that somebody at the meeting was like, but there's not enough trans people. And then the higher ups in the LGBTQ community were like, no problem, we'll make more. And that's exactly what's happened. And we're still not to the part that I just figured out for myself, because that part a lot of us have known and a lot of us have called out. But even knowing that, I was still perplexed about why they're so determined not to allow people like Blair, Ariel, Lady Maga, or the LGB Alliance people at Pride. And I figured out the reason, and the reason is because if you talk to any one of us that are from the community and are actually gay or actually trans or actually lesbian, what they'll end up finding out from us is that a lot of us at some point in our lives were the same place that they are, as far as maybe being a little bit confused about what it is we were. Because even in recent years, a fair amount of the straight world, and especially in more conservative areas, kind of have inadvertently even led people to believe that if you're a certain amount of girly, you might be a girl, and if you're a certain amount of tomboy, then you might be a boy. And I honestly don't think that it's anything that most people in the straight world have done intentionally. It's just when people grow up seeing things a particular way, and they have this idea of what they're supposed to be, if this is their sex, if this is their gender, then sometimes maybe the wires get a little bit crossed and they think, okay, well, if I'm not that, or if I'm not going to be that version of that, then I must be this instead. And the this would be the opposite gender, would be the opposite sex. And a lot of us went through that when we were younger. And so we can relate, and we can let them know firsthand that sometimes you do just grow out of it. Like I've talked about it on this channel before. When I was younger, I thought I was meant to be a girl, and that lasted until I was about 16, and then it just completely left me. And it was when I realized that just being a gay man was an option, and I got to live a little bit of that life, and I got to see what that life actually looked like. And I saw older gays that were completely happy and not at all transitioned or anything like that. And once it really did sink in for me that being gay was an option, the idea of me being the opposite sex or being born in the wrong body completely left my mind. It was not an issue anymore. But had TikTok been around, or had people really been pushing me towards that lifestyle because they were constantly affirming that that must be what I am, and if I felt like that was the most welcoming community for me, and say I was somewhat isolated in either my school or my home life, or I felt like my parents just didn't understand me, that could have been the push to make me start doing things to myself that would lead me down a road that at a point would probably seem like you couldn't turn back from. And so what the activists and the organizers in the community really want to avoid is people like us talking to trans people and accidentally having them reconsider and, God forbid, deciding to detransition because they realized that they could probably be just as happy without being a lifelong medical patient, without having to be a constant victim, without having to have all sorts of surgeries done to themselves. And if these people start coming to these kinds of realizations, that could cause a chain reaction, and then more and more people will start deciding to either not start transition to begin with, or at least consider detransition. And then what's going to happen to all that money that people are making of LGBTQ activism? What's going to happen to that fear economy that they're able to keep pumping for more and more money? What's going to happen to all the lobbying and the political maneuvering? What's going to happen to the parties that they like to throw? What's going to happen to Pride itself? Which Pride itself is a huge business. Like I discussed that part of what Toronto lost was more than $700,000. More than $700,000 just to throw a party. And a lot of the Pride budgets are well over $1 million. So that's a lot of money to be losing. And what's going to happen when the money really starts to dry up? I mean, sure, there probably will always be a need for some LGBTQ specific services. But for the most part, everything's going to have to be pared down. The jobs that have been this far kind of glamorous or offered certain perks are no longer going to be glamorous, are no longer going to offer those perks. And everybody from within the activist arm of the LGBTQ plus community is going to have to just get regular jobs, or the jobs that they've been holding so far are just going to turn into regular jobs. So they need to make sure that people like us are nowhere near their cash cows, so we can, even if it's inadvertently, throw a wrench in the system. And especially since we ourselves are no longer a source of income for them. And those are, in my opinion, the real reasons that common sense gays, lesbians, and trans people are being kicked out of Pride events, and eventually will turn into the reason that Pride is officially over. Because if we, the majority within that minority group, are no longer supportive of what Pride is and no longer even welcomed at Pride, good luck keeping up the grift. Anyway, that's where I'm at on it. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Thank you for watching. As always, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.
They bought into his bullshit.